Welcome back to a new series that I want to start on the channel. It's called Endgame Strategies, and I'm going to talk about endgame positions, pawn endgames, and very nice technical and also theoretical endgames that you need to know. So for the first episode, I brought a game that I played on Lichess in a 5+5 game, and I'm going to show you the whole game, even though the main focus of these episodes is obviously the end game, but I still want you to know how the position actually happened so that you get a little bit of a feeling also how to play in the middle game if you want to reach a certain end game position that looks very similar to what you already know. But I'm not going to dwell too much on opening theory or middle game strategy. It was a strange blitz game, but I still think the still think the end game is very interesting because I was kind of shocked when I analyzed this game what the engine actually told me. So we're gonna um, see a queen's pawn game here in the opening that is a little bit strange. I gambited a pawn for the initiative. Engine says whether or not I've got compensation is very questionable, but he holds on to the pawn for very long in the middle game. We trade a lot. Here the engine already says white is probably winning here. But I've got nice pawns with f5 here after move 16. And we're going to see that these pawns, G, F, E, and D pawns, which are very far advanced already, are going to be crucial for the endgame that will arise very soon. Because after castles, I push the pawn even further. He gives a queen check and I queen trade, which is okay. He centralizes the knight and I trade my bishop. And after rook b8, here it's already, after all these moves, white has basically already somehow managed to blunder away the advantage from +4 to plus 0.5. So the endgame here, a double rook endgame, tends to be very drawish, and I was already happy after all these moves that I can try to play for a draw here because, as you saw, the middle game was not that spectacular. I reach this position where I win back my pawn, and he manages to trade off the rooks, and here I trade off one of the rooks as well. King c3, king a7, king b3, king a6, and king a4, and we have reached this very boring endgame that is completely drawish. Neither side can make progress, equal pawns. I was already a little bit afraid here in this position. I thought, okay, he's probably better because he's got the active king. I blocked the pawns, which is correct. He goes back and forth, I push my pawns, he goes back and forth. And here I was already a little bit worried. He came in here, which is the blunder of the game that I want to talk about here in this endgame episode. I was thinking, okay, I've got a draw here. I can just move back and forth. I'm not gonna let him in, and then I can just quickly have my draw in this game. So I play king a7, which draws the game, which is what I wanted. But interestingly enough, here in this position after king a5, I have a winning position with black. And you can pause the video quickly if you want to calculate this for your own in your own time. I have to say, after like 15 minutes of analysis after the game, I only realized what was really going on here. So I think the motive you're probably gonna spot quite quickly. But it's not that easy to actually calculate this. You see with the king back and forth, there is no real winning combination. So you have to push pawns at some point to win this game. And I'm gonna show you how to actually win this endgame with a technique that is called pawn breaks. So you sacrifice one or multiple pawns in order to advance one pawn very far or even queen it. Here it's very important to understand that the quality of the pawns is much more important than the quantity. So in some of these variations that I'm going to show you, black is going to sacrifice 3 or 4 pawns, but one of the pawns is going to queen, and then you're still going to win the game. So the move that you have to find in this position is not what I played in the game, not king a7, is f4. A very great move that I wouldn't even have considered in a blitz game. Maybe in a classical game I would have considered this, but not in a blitz game. So now you have to think with white there are multiple responses. So I think there are three main responses that really make sense. You either take with the e-pawn, you can take with the g-pawn, or you can try to run back with your king to defend. And we're going to take a look at all of these step by step. So the first reaction for me would be to take with the e-pawn. Looks very natural. So you sacrifice one of the pawns, but now you have h4, also a very nice move. Let's say you take this pawn as well. Then you have g3, sacrificing a third pawn. And now the question is already, what are you going to do? If you take this pawn as well, e3, the king is not able to reach the pawn, and you're going to queen, and this is obviously winning. The queen is just going to take this pawn here, and then all the other pawns are just going to fall, and then you have queen more. I think we don't have to discuss this much further. The idea here is also very complicated. You can't really block the pawn either, because I can either take here and then this pawn goes forward, or I can just play e3 and there's nothing you can do. So another attempt would have been to maybe in this position run back with your king, but then you just take the f pawn and then one of the pawns is going to queen. So very difficult already after e takes f4, h4, another pawn sacrifice. Maybe there is also this idea of bringing the king back immediately, but if you don't take the pawn, if you bring back the king, then just h3. This is also a motive that we're gonna see later on in the video. You sacrifice another pawn, but you're gonna win back this pawn at least. She takes h3, and now the h pawn is gonna queen. So you see, the middle game strategy pushing the pawns forward is normally a little bit questionable. It can be very interesting. Sometimes it works out, like in this position, but it can also be very tricky to defend all the pawns in an endgame when the pawns are too far advanced. So I hope it's clear that e takes f4 just walks into h4, and here it's not you're not able to defend this. Engine says -20, it says mate in 20 or -20. So e takes f4 is not possible here. Let's take a look at the other reasonable move. G takes f4, but then again we have h4, and the threat now is obviously just walking here. And if you take the pawn, then this pawn is going to recapture, and another h pawn is going to queen. So let's say you try bring the king back, then there's h3. You can take once, and the pawn is gonna walk through. No matter what else you do here, if you try something like this, the pawn is just gonna walk. Very difficult position already. So g takes f4 also walks into h4. And now we have to take a look at what happens after f4 in the beginning if you just immediately try to bring back the king. King before. You have already probably guessed it, h4 again, and now all these pawns which are so far advanced, you're gonna sacrifice one pawn or multiple pawns here just to bring one pawn through the enemy lines to queen. Let's say you bring the king even further back, king c3, then just h3. Same motive as before, pawn is walking. Maybe you can take the pawn now, h3, pawn is walking. Maybe you can try to take this pawn, h3. You can also try to take the h pawn, which is interesting. Finally, white has eliminated the h pawn, and now the h pawn can't queen anymore, but now it just has g3. You can take this pawn, f3. You have sacrificed two pawns, but it doesn't matter, because the f pawn is gonna queen, and you're gonna win the game. So I think a very interesting idea here in this drawish looking position where I really thought there was nothing going on. f4, sacrificing 3 pawns to make a queen and win the game. Pawn breaks, a very interesting topic, but also very hard to calculate, I think, in a practical game, especially if you're not that great in calculation. I'm about 1700 elo in a classical game, and I think this would already be difficult to spot, even though some of the variations are kind of forced, but very easy not to get lost in this tree of variations. So I'm going to show you the end of the game. King a5. By the way, what is the correct way to play? Instead of king a5, to hold a draw with white, king b4 is correct. And then you just draw the game. If I try the same pawn breaks now, by the way, that's the difference between king a5 here and king b4. It doesn't work, because now with all the pawn breaks, the king is actually close enough to stop promotion, and white is winning. So king b4, very small difference. But I thought it wouldn't really have mattered, but if you take a look at the pawn breaks very closely, it definitely did matter. My opponent, king a5, a blunder. I missed the pawn break as well, king a7, because I was so focused on not letting him in. I just wanted to draw. So I play king a7 and we agreed to a draw in this position, which is now justified because now black can't win anymore. White is just going to go back, and then I just have to settle for a draw. Very interesting position, I think. Out of nowhere, I think, was this position to actually break with f4, create a pass pawn, queen, and win the game in this pawn endgame that looked very drawish. So I hope this was a nice instruction for you and a good start of the series endgame technique or endgame strategy. If you have endgames that you want me to cover, you can send that in. You can also send me games to analyze. I hope you like this video. Check out my Twitch for live chess gameplay and my Instagram. See you in the next video. Bye.